Welcome back to our discussion, Navigate Complex IT Modernization, sponsored by T-Rex Solutions here on Federal News Network. My guests today are Jason Keplinger, Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at T-Rex, and Utpal Amin, the Chief Engineer at T-Rex. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And in this segment, I want to go into what is really a signature and interesting project in the federal government, and that is namely the Census Bureau. In a matter of a few years, has modernized its infrastructure, adopted a lot of cloud technologies, and I guess in some ways that mirrors the history of the agency because it was the very first one to use automated tabulation, I think, for the 1890 census. So they have a history of innovation and modernizing as the country's gotten bigger and their decennial obligations get more complicated. So tell us about Census, what they've done, and how they did it.
Sure. So we work across multiple agencies, but our key program is associated with the 2020 census, which was the Technical Integrator Program. And this was a innovative approach that the government census took in order to make sure that there was an integrated solution and an infrastructure that crossed the 52 systems that make up the 2020 census set of systems. What they were trying to achieve from a 2010 perspective, most of the work was done via paper. Most of the responses were taken in via paper. This was the first internet response set of data that was taken in by the census. So this was the first internet response ever. What they were also trying to achieve is improve public access to responses. They were trying to improve the workforce in the field by automating some of that in the field. And also doing a little bit more with mobility. So the contract was, the technical integrator contract covered from end to end system availability, system production, system infrastructure, and integration. So we're talking about 52 systems, which 18 of them we moved into the cloud. 7 of them we moved onto a hyper-converged platform with 254 field sites that were deployed for the census workers so that while they're out there collecting response data, they're in these field offices doing remote work, which included almost 20,000 remote workers. And with over 400,000 enumerators in the field. So those are people carrying around a handheld device which connects back into the enterprise and collects those responses. So the key to that also was that internet response system. The internet response system was deployed into the cloud and was able to handle almost 1.2 million concurrent users. So we tested it up to that point in time. So as the technical integrator responsibility includes both cybersecurity, performance and scalability, the migration of applications, and testing of those applications, so that we covered the full gambit of getting a system out into the cloud and then being able to test it and deploy it and actually operate it in the cloud also.
And we know it's up and running right at the moment as we speak. And Utpal, did the applications, these 52 applications and some of the ones that were hyper-converged, did they come to the project in a state that they were ready for hyper-convergence, ready for hosting in the cloud, or did some kind of groundwork need to be done on the code that was a part of those 52 applications?
So all the applications came in varying level of readiness. And one of the things we did for the census program is we had something called account managers who worked side by side with the applications team to kind of get their requirements, work with them, and figure out how are we going to migrate them to the cloud. They helped the systems team kind of not only architect it, but also migrate it and define their path into the cloud. They also worked with the systems team and brought our DevOps team to the systems team and made sure that all of their deployment as well as software integration was done using automation, and so that we were able to quickly migrate them into the cloud. Once during the transition phase, when we migrated them over into the cloud, we also had these account managers, which were kind of embedded into the systems team, work with our monitoring team to kind of make sure all the systems are monitored at various levels so that during operations, we do not run into any issues, or there is always alerts and early warnings available so that we can fix those problems before they turn into an outages.
I imagine in some cases you might have had to maybe re-render the logic with code that was more cloud friendly. Is that part of some of the prep that might have to be done?
Absolutely. Some of the applications had to be changed in terms of making more cloud friendly, or some of the logic and their business was adopted to use cloud services rather than more of a native type of standard databases or standard practices. And so we work hand in hand, our DevOps team worked hand in hand with the systems teams to make sure they're using the right services at the right in an appropriate manner, so that they can harness all the benefits of the cloud. One of the examples that Jason talked about is the internet self-response. For that particular application, we were able to leverage some of the features of the cloud where we are able to burst up in the cloud and be able to have additional resources when those 1.2 million users came into picture. And when there are less need for those resources, we were able to scale down. And that way we are able to use the power of the cloud.
Yeah, so really that scalability is what comes into this so critically, because census, I guess, they have areas of huge requirement, large loads, and then they have periods of relative dormancy too, I imagine, for some of the systems. Maybe not so much for the decennial count, but for some of their monthly programs and surveys that they do throughout the year and all the 10 years in between the decennial counts.
Absolutely. So the census in general have a very load that is where it has lots of peaks and valleys. And so it is a very good candidate for a cloud-based systems where you don't have to have all the resources needed all the time. You just use the resources when they're needed and then give back the resources to the cloud. It helps from a budgeting perspective. It also helps from overall usage perspective so that we don't have to kind of maintain all the resources while they're not needed. We don't have to patch them. We don't have to monitor them. From a continuous security monitoring perspective, we don't have to monitor because those resources have been taken out from the usage.
And I imagine it's important to build those patterns into the SLA that you negotiate with the cloud service provider.
Absolutely. So one of the things we did is we worked hand in hand with the cloud service provider for the census program. We were able to, so for example, we had to make sure that some of the peaks, census is a very large peak, we had to work with the cloud service provider to make sure that they have the capacity available when we needed those peaks, or when the peaks are gone, we relinquish that capacity, but then in a month or so when it's needed again, we're able to bring it back.
All right, we're going to take a short break on that note and come back and discuss some of the lessons learned. I'm Tom Temin. This discussion is Navigate Complex IT Modernization, sponsored by T-Rex Solution here on Federal News Network.